Hello and welcome to this installment of the EPS Lecture Series. I'm Dr. Timothy Bray. I'm an Associate Professor of Practice here in the School of Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences and the Director of our Institute for Urban Policy Research. Now, if you're like most of us, this time around senior year, you began asking questions more deeply about college. What will you study? Where will you go? I'd like to help you on the journey today by sharing a little bit of my journey. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I think are really important for you to consider as you're moving down this path to your college education. And I trust that by the end, you'll understand that the School of Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences at UT Dallas is really the best equipped to help make this change in your life. The first question I would ask you is, what will you learn? Confucius reminds us that he who learns but does not think is lost, and he who thinks but does not learn is in great danger. Now, oftentimes this question gets reduced to one of, what degree plan should I study? Should I take economics or international political economy or public policy or any one of the dozens of programs that most schools offer? But I submit to you that it's actually a much deeper question. Because if you really understand what college is about, you begin to realize that it's not about us giving you information. It's not about this transfer of knowledge from professor to student. Much more important is the ability that you will grow over time to think about the knowledge and think about the information, and most importantly, to adapt, to incorporate new data and new findings into your understanding of the world or your city or your neighborhood. This is really the purpose of education, to help you become a thinker. My goal when I teach a class is to not just give you the data, but to help you understand what that means, what it means for you as a member of the community, what it means for you as a leader in the world, because frankly, what we know today is going to be radically different in just 3 or 4 years. So it's crucial that you develop the ability to incorporate new knowledge and to understand and change how you see the world based on that information. I believe that what we do at EPS is geared exactly to that. The second question I would ask you is not just what will you learn, but will it change you? Because after all, if you've studied something and you're no different when you finished than when you began, you really haven't learned it. St. John Henry Newman says, to live is to change, and to be perfect is to have changed often. Really, our goal then in pursuing an education is to be changed into a better person, a better decision maker, a better leader. I'd like to share a bit about my journey to help you understand yours. Now, I studied criminology at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. I got my PhD in 2003, and I developed quite a good ability for statistical modeling and mapping and interpreting data. But it was really just an exercise to me. It was an academic exercise. So I began working in 2005 with an organization called the Foundation for Community Empowerment. Now, FCE worked primarily in South Dallas, which is a neighborhood in Dallas that has traditionally had high levels of poverty. Residents in this neighborhood have a much harder time getting by than many folks in Dallas. Now, the picture you see here is the intersection of Hatcher and Syene. And when they took me on a tour in 2005, there was an A1 Quick Stop here. It was a Quickie Mart. It was mostly a packaged liquor store. But a sign in the window said that they sold cigarettes by the cigarette, and they sold diapers by the diaper. And that sign really got under my skin. At the time, my middle daughter had just been born, and I realized it had never been an economic decision for me to change my daughter's pants. It really wasn't even a consideration, and yet here I was in a neighborhood where folks had such limited resources that they may be forced to buy one diaper at a time. And I realized how radically different my lived reality was from so many people that I called my neighbors. So at that moment, all of the statistical knowledge, all of the mapping and the modeling and the data began to take on a different role in my life. That's really what education is about, and I want to share what it did for me. For me, it led to the creation of the Institute for Urban Policy Research. Now, we are at the School of Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences, but we work with faculty from all over North Texas and all over UT system. And we focus in three areas. The first is research. We are a Research One university after all. But in research, we do what we call strategic research. It's about taking information and data and making it relevant to decision makers, helping them make data-driven decisions. We also do program evaluation. So we work with many nonprofits, local governments around issues of understanding what works and why. We're also heavily involved in education. This fall, we're starting our internship in public policy research. We're working with undergrads from across the university to immerse them in experiences that will shape their understanding of policy. Finally, we engage in outreach. This is one of our high school programs that we do every year, where we bring leaders from around the region, high school-aged leaders, to help them understand data and how to express it and how to shape policy. Some of what we found is shocking, some not so much. First, while we may be diverse, we don't live together. So when we talk about Dallas, we talk about a marginal diversity. Dallas is 30% non-Hispanic white, 25% non-Hispanic black or African American, 41% Hispanic, a small percentage of non-Hispanic Asians. And so it seems like a fairly diverse community. But actually, very few neighborhoods resemble this diversity. Out of the 293 census tracts in the city, only about 1 in 5 is diverse, meaning there's not one group that's in a majority. So when you look at this map, the neighborhoods that are shaded in gray, those are neighborhoods that are predominantly non-Hispanic white. The neighborhoods in green, predominantly non-Hispanic African American. The neighborhoods in blue are Hispanic neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods in orange are primarily Asian neighborhoods. What you'll notice is these neighborhoods, generally speaking, aren't next to one another. All of the Hispanic neighborhoods tend to be clustered together. All of the African American neighborhoods tend to be clustered together, and all of the non-Hispanic white neighborhoods tend to be clustered together. This fuels that lived reality. It's entirely possible that someone who lives in predominantly non-Hispanic white northern Dallas has no idea of the lived reality of his or her neighbors living to the south. And it's not just where we live, but how we get by. Again, at the margin, about 1 in 5 Dallas residents lives below the poverty line, but it's not the same for everyone. For non-Hispanic white residents, it's 8%. For Hispanic residents, it's 1 in 5. For African American residents, it's a little over 1 in 4. And for children in Dallas, it's even higher, 27%. So understanding that resources are not uniformly distributed. I may live in a neighborhood that has a poverty rate unlike any place else in the city, and yet no one else knows it. And it's not just benefits, but burdens are unequally distributed. Of the city's 16 neighborhoods of concentrated poverty, these are neighborhoods where 40% or more of the population lives below the poverty line. In these neighborhoods, none are located in white neighborhoods. 3 are found in Hispanic neighborhoods, 2 are found in diverse neighborhoods, and the remaining 11 are all found in African American neighborhoods. So this burden is not uniformly distributed, and we see the same thing with public transit. We have more public transit stops in African American neighborhoods, but they don't take you as far. Public transit reaches roughly 4,000 jobs within 30 minutes of an African American neighborhood, but roughly 30,000 jobs within 30 minutes of a white neighborhood. So the fact that we don't live together actually plays out in being able to get to jobs, being able to get to stores. We ask quite often, how do we know what we know? As the COVID crisis began in North Texas, we found ourselves asking for information. Just like everyone else. How many people have been infected? What do we think the demand will be on our resources? Do we have enough hospital beds? We realized that for each question, The answers are often in different places and not easily accessible. Moreover, the disease presents a regional problem and demands regional solutions, yet most of our data sit in silos. So we created the North Texas COVID Data Viewer to help policymakers and residents better understand the disease. The goal here was to put all of the various information from disparate sources together in one place to help drive decisions. I'd like to leave you with one last question. We've asked, what will you learn and will it change you? But I want to ask you, what will you change? John F. Kennedy says change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. When I'm teaching students and I'm looking out at faces, I recognize that I'm looking at today's leaders. And tomorrow they will take up the mantle. I'm convinced that some of our most pressing problems today that we might even think are intractable will be solved by the folks sitting in our classes today. That's why I believe it's so important that we don't just give you the content, but we equip you to live in this changing world. Yes, getting a job is important, but what you do with that job, the way you take up that charge to change the world we live in, is even more crucial. I believe that we equip students in the School of Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences to take up that charge, to take their place as leaders in the world of the future. I trust that you'll see now that our role at Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences is more than just providing content. It's more than just teaching classes. We do that, and we do that very well. But more importantly, we create experiences that help you take on this new role. We create opportunities for you to engage in today's pressing problems, so when you face them tomorrow, you'll be better equipped to change them. Thanks for spending time with us today, and I hope to see you in the fall.